Hi, everyone. Once again, welcome back to Sociology 101. I am instructor Joe Kubiak, I guess, right? And not like we're going to be talking a whole lot in person, but yeah. I'm going to be posting these video lectures like this, right? Every so often, you're going to see them probably every week in every module. There'll be at least one, sometimes two. Please watch these, okay? Because they're important. Number one, I like doing them because I like to talk, and I really like talking about sociology. So there's going to be a lot of you'll see a lot of energy and enthusiasm that I carry with me into these sorts of things. But in addition to that, I'm going to put certain things on the board that are going to help try to explain some concepts, right? And I'm going to film them, record them for you, so you can get a sense of what it is that. I'm going to fill in the blanks, I guess you could say, right? Because reading the textbook, that's kind of dry. So I'm going to try to supplement this with something that's a little bit more engaging. Try to get you a sense of like, if this was in a classroom, how would we actually be talking about these sorts of things? And together, I think this format's going to work out really well for you. So please, I encourage you, please watch all these. And in some cases, you're actually going to need to watch this because the materials that I talk about are the things you're going to need to know in order to actually do some of the discussion board posts. So please don't just skip over these. These are very, very important. To start with, let's talk about what is sociology. What is sociology? What do sociologists do, right? How do we know what this stuff is? I'm going to guess that the greater majority of you probably took this class because it fulfills some sort of requirement, right? And by the way, please bear with me with any camera issues. I'm just doing this on my phone. It's kind of informal, ad hoc, just as it go along, right? I'm just trying to talk to you, right? Like if this was a classroom, I'd just be talking to my class. So I'm trying to recreate some of that same environment. But I'm going to guess, like I said, most of you guys are probably taking this class because it fulfills a requirement, right? General awareness credit or something like that, right? Some crap like that. And you're like, I don't know what to take. And somebody said, sociology is easy, take that. And that's okay, right? That's okay. And to be fair, sociology is easy. And I'll tell you why sociology is easy. Sociology is easy because you've done this stuff, because you know this stuff, because you've seen this stuff, because you do this stuff. And the things we're going to talk about today, most of the things are going to be pretty obvious to you. You're going to be like, oh yeah, I guess he's right. Or, oh yeah, I've seen that before. Or yeah, I did that yesterday, right? You're going to be like, I get this. I get what he's talking about. It makes complete total sense to me. And that's what makes sociology great, because it's explaining how or why people do what they do, but only when in certain situations. And typically you're dealing with group dynamics and group situations. But at the same time, like I said, it's stuff that you yourself are probably at some point going to be like, oh yeah, been there, done that, right? So to begin with, sociology is a social science, okay? Social science meaning it adheres to the scientific method. So what we do in sociology is it's empirical. It's empirical, it's testable. Empirical means that it's observable, it's testable, it's concrete, right? We can go out there and we can see it. So when we do something in sociology, when we try to come up with a theory or something that explains human behavior, it has to be produced in such a way that it can be repeatable, that we can do it again, that we can show people, hey, look, this is true in just about every circumstance, right? And that's important to what it is that we're trying to understand here, that it's observable, it's testable, it's repeatable. So if I tell you something, you can walk outside and see it. And that's important because that is the essence of sociology, is that it is rooted in real world observation, okay? So that's the first thing, it's empirical. That's important to understand. Again, so just because it's empirical doesn't mean that we can actually, you can see something, but that doesn't tell you something about human behavior. Instead, what you have to do is you have to try to figure out a way to make it make sense to other people, right? If you're gonna try to communicate something. So what sociologists do is we come up with what we refer to as theories or models of human behavior that explain human behavior, that tell us something about it in such a way that we can actually communicate that to someone else and say, look, here's what people are doing, here's why they're doing it, here's how we know they're doing it for this reason, and look, you can see this in other places as well. So when we talk about theories and models, a theory, right, and you've probably heard of theory, evolutionary theory, Big Bang theory, right? A theory is simply put an explanation for why or how something happens. So when we come up with the theory of human behavior, we're trying to explain some aspect of human behavior. Now this is important for sociology too. It differentiates sociology from things like psychology or philosophy, which is this. Sociology deals specifically with people and how they engage with other people. Specifically, group behavior and how people, the term we use is modify their behavior in groups. Because what people tend to do, especially in our society, and again, you guys know this because you do it, people change their behavior depending upon where they're at, who they're interacting with, what they're doing, what the expectations of the people around them are. Now, you may not know and you may not consider it, and you may not think about it, you may not be aware that you're doing it, but you are. Okay, and that's the key to sociology, is that these things that we are typically unaware of, or that we're not really paying attention to, sociologists go and they look at them and they say, well, how can we explain that? And we make people aware, we make people understand, we make people realize that this is what they're doing, this is how they're doing it, this is why they're doing it. And I'm going to use some examples here real quick, and I think most of you guys are going to get this. It would be surprising to me if you didn't, but even if you this doesn't necessarily apply to you, which it probably will, you still understand what I'm talking about. Think about it this way, right? If we're talking about modifying our behavior in groups, right? So we say sociologists we study how people modify their behavior when they're in groups. Think about a couple different kinds of groups that you interact with, say, on a daily basis, right? You have, for example, a group of friends, and maybe your family group, right? Your mom and your dad, sisters and brothers, something like that if you still live at home. Or work, right? At work, there's a group there, right? Other employees, customers, things like that you might have to work with on an everyday basis. Think about that, right? Now think about how those people act, how they dress, how they talk, how they speak, the kind of activities they engage in, the things they do, and then think about how it's different when you're with them as with somebody else or one of those other groups. For example, I'm gonna bet, and I'm betting I'm right on this. Some of this may not apply to everybody, but if you swear, even casually swear, right? And like I said, I cuss, like I said, I gotta careful with stuff. But even if you casually swear, I'm gonna bet that when you're with your friends, you probably swear more than when you're around your mom, right? That would make sense. I'm 40 years old, just about. And when I'm with my mom, if I'm at their house or something like that, my mom, and I swear my mom will still say to me, Joseph Michael, why would you talk like that? Don't say that, right? And I'm 40 years old. So I try to avoid swearing around her. Not because she's going to ground me, right? Because I think it ain't going to work very well, right? I'll be like, the hell with you, I'm going to get my car and drive back home, right? So, but because she's my mom, and I don't want to offend her, I don't want to hurt her feelings, and I don't want to listen to it, right? I don't want to hear it. Oh my God, Mom, you just grow up. This is the real world, right? This is the things I'm thinking in my head, but at the same time, she's my mom, so I gotta be respectful, right? So I say to myself, you know what? Rather than having to listen to this, it's just easier for me to modify my behavior. Instead of swearing like I would if I'm with my friends, I'm just not gonna swear when I'm around my mom. I'm betting that you do the same sort of thing. And it might not be swearing, right? Maybe it's something else that you do with your friends that you won't do with your mom and dad. I can't guess everything that you do, but at the same time, I'm betting you can think of some other things, right? Some other examples. Now think of it this way too, right? So with your friends, with your family, right? You do different things than say when you're at work, right? For those of you that have a job, probably a majority of you have a job, right? When you go to work, you do things differently. Again, you modify your behavior than when you're at home, right? Or when you're with your friends. Maybe when you're with your friends, you complain about things, right? You're like, this sucks, dude. I hate this stuff, whatever the case may be, right? Whatever it is we're talking about, right? Maybe you go to a movie, you're like, I hate this movie, it sucks, right? When you're at work, you're like, man, I love my job, right? Even if you don't. But you have to pretend like you do, because you realize and you understand, and we all do, that in order to keep your job, you got to do your job and you got to pretend like you like your job, right? So maybe you really like your job, because I like my job, I love my job. This is fun. This is what I do right now. This is what I'm doing, right? I love my job. But again, what I do here at work is different than what I do here at home. The way I talk, I don't talk about certain things. I don't engage in certain actions, right? Same sort of thing for you. You have to go there and you have to pretend like you like interacting with customers. You have to pretend like you're happy to be there. You have to pretend like you like your boss, right? And again, maybe you do. But that doesn't change the fact that when you talk to your mom, you're going to talk to her a different way than when you talk to your boss. And when you talk to your boss, you're going to talk to him a different way than when you talk to, say, your best friend, right? This is what we're talking about when we're talking about sociology. This is what we mean when we talk about modifying your behavior when you're in groups, right? And this is the essence of what sociologists study. How people do this, why people do this. Now I'm going to give you guys another example, right? We're going to talk about how to develop a theory or a model of human behavior. And I'm going to give you guys an example, and I'm betting it's an example that we're all familiar with, right? I'm going to try to turn this, well, I'm going to turn it this way, right? So you can see, okay? So I showed you a minute ago, right? I'm in a classroom, okay? So you can see all the desks lined up, all nice and pretty and stuff. There's nobody in here. I don't know, I'm saying there's probably like 8 rows of desks, 5 rows, maybe like 35, 40 chairs in here, because not every row is complete, right? So there's a lot of desks in here. So let's use this as an example, because I'm thinking this is something all of us are familiar with, because we've all went through some level of school. If you're in college, right, obviously you went through elementary school, junior high school, however that worked out for you, right? But I'm betting we've all been in the classroom on the first day of class. And one of the interesting dynamics, I see this every semester when I teach my in-person classes, is that when I'm in the classroom before everybody comes in, that I can see people and how they choose their seats. And it's very, very interesting, because people do it in a very specific way. And almost every time, without fail, with some very rare exceptions, I can almost predict where every person is going to sit. Maybe not to the exact seat, but I can determine in some cases the sort of location they're going to be at, right? Whether they're over here in this corner, over there in that corner, up here in the front or way in the back. I can kind of predict based on the order that people come in the door where they're going to sit. Not physical criteria, right? It doesn't matter what the person walking in, if it's a guy or a girl or anything like that necessarily, right? Sometimes that matters in this case, but just simply because they're human beings and their behavior tells me something about it. I understand I have an expectation because it's based off of what I've observed in the past. And in that way, I can predict behavior. So I'm going to put this down so we can see, and I'm going to talk. But I'm hoping you guys can see the chairs behind me. Let me make sure that you can, so we can see how this works. Okay. But if you're looking around me, right, like I said, there's probably like 35, 40 chairs in here. I'm hoping you can hear me. I'm going to talk a little louder so you can. I'm going to bet if you have an empty classroom like this on the first day of class, okay, the first person who walks in that door before class starts, where do you think they're going to sit? Are they going to sit up here in the front, right in the middle? Probably not, right? Are they going to sit way in the back corner over here? Probably not, right? Now, we may not ever think about these things until someone like myself, a sociologist, brings them out into the open and says, let's talk about this. But think about it. If you're that person, where do you sit? I'm going to bet, and I'm probably right 90% of the time, the first person in is going to sit somewhere in the middle. In one of the middle rows, maybe not right in the middle, but in one of the middle rows in a middle seat. And the reason we do that, well, you can think about the reason we do that. You don't want to sit in the front, right? Because you don't want the teacher to call it. Or you don't want to be in the way, or you don't want anybody behind you looking at you. Whatever the reason is, we know and recognize that typically that's not what people do. You also don't want to sit way in the back because you don't want the instructor who's there to see you and think, well, this guy doesn't care, he's not interested, he's not engaged in the classroom, like, therefore I have a bad opinion of him right off the bat, right? We don't want that. These are the things we're thinking in our head, right? Experience tells us that the people sitting in front are what? Nerds, geeks, right? Overachievers, right? We have these sorts of understanding of that. And maybe you are one of those people. Good for you, right? Because the nerds are the ones that make all the money and go on to amazing success. Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, right? Yeah, anyway. So nerds rule the world. But anyway, but at the same time, for the most part, the greater majority of the time, people don't sit here and they don't sit there. Instead, they sit somewhere around here, right? Now, I can predict this just about every time without fail. And I can also predict that the second person walking in, I can't necessarily tell you ahead of time which chair they're going to sit in, but I can tell you which chair they're not going to sit in. How do I know? Well, if the first person walking in is sitting here, I can guarantee you they are not going to sit here, 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 or here, unless they know the person. And it's unlikely to know the person. But if they don't know the person, they're not going to sit there. Now, why would that be? Think about it again. Think about it again, what you know from experience, which is this. That's a stranger. You don't know that person. So you don't want to sit next to that person because you're thinking to yourself, if I sit next to that person, they might be a weirdo. And you might be right. Now, chances are they're a very nice person. You yourself might be that person that comes in first and you're like, hey, why doesn't anybody want to sit next to me? I'm a really nice guy. Well, the other people don't know that. In your whole life, you've been told to be wary of strangers. And that works on you. It has an effect on you. You may not realize it. You may not think about it. You may not notice it, but it does. So you come in this classroom, you see 35 seats, and one that's taken, chances are you're going to sit away from that person, even if it's just a short distance away. You're probably not going to come in and sit right next to or right in front of them. Also, think of it this way from the person's perspective. 35 empty seats, person walks in, sits right next to you. You, like everybody else in the world, are probably thinking, weirdo, right? Why would they do that? Have you ever been to a movie? And well, I'm thinking if you go to a movie, chances are when you sit down, you leave a seat between yourself and the other people if you don't know them. Say it's a crowded movie theater. You ever been to a movie and somebody comes and sits right next to you or right behind you when there's 100 empty seats? That really irritates you, doesn't it? Because it irritates the hell out of me. I had a lady do that to me once at a movie. Actually, with my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time. We got up and moved. I said, we got to move because this chick's driving me crazy. I can't believe she came and sat down right freaking next to me when there's 100 empty seats in here. So we actually got up and moved, which maybe was her plan all along, right? Maybe she wanted to sit there and she didn't want to sit next to me, and she knew I would move because maybe she's a sociologist too, right? I know what she was doing. But either way, I got up and I moved. So maybe you know and understand it from that perspective. Maybe you've never thought about that before, but I guarantee that you do this. I guarantee that other people do it, and I guarantee that if you observe things and you pay attention, you're going to see this happen all the time, all the places that you go, right? So again, we have one person sitting here, first person comes in, and then over here a couple seats later we have the second person comes in, right? So where's the third person going to sit? Well, I don't know for sure exactly what seat they're going to pick, but I do know they're not going to sit next to this person, they're not going to sit next to that person. So going off of our pattern, I'm going to suggest they're probably going to sit one row over right here in the middle. That's probably going to be true, right? So that's where they sit. So then the fourth person that comes in says, okay, well, there's these three people. Well, I don't want to sit way in the back corner either because I'm actually like the class, or I'm actually interested. I want the teacher to like me. So I'm going to come sit up here in the front or somewhere up here in a different row away from the person, right? So you have sort of a grid pattern. Here, then here, then here, then here, then here. And people will fill in these seats accordingly until you get to a point where you have to sit next to somebody, because all the seats are filled up to the point where there's space in between them, but now you have to fill in the seats because say you're the 15th person out of the 30 students in the class to come in. So where do you sit? Well, maybe you sit the place that's closest to the door because you don't want everybody looking at you. Maybe you sit farthest in the back because you don't want everybody who's staring at you looking at the back of your head while you're in class. Maybe you're self-conscious about that. Or maybe you look for the least, weird person that's around, and you say, well, that's where I want to sit. Maybe this is where other things come into play. If you're a guy walking the door, maybe you're looking for the really hot chick in the class. You're like, I want to go sit next to her because she ain't got no ring on her finger, and I want, that's kind of cool. Or vice versa, if you're a girl, you're coming in, maybe you want to sit next to a really hot guy. Who knows, right? Something like that. Or maybe it's somebody that has something that you see that you have something in common with, right? If you're a fan of a particular baseball team, you walk in, you see a guy who's got a Diamondback shirt on, or Diamondback hat, and you're like, cool, I'm gonna go sit next to him because I'm a Diamondbacks fan, right? Maybe that's the case. I don't know, right? So there may be criteria there, but the point is this: you have no choice but to sit next to somebody. So that changes the dynamic. But this same pattern evolves, right? So until all the chairs are filled up, the last three people coming in, maybe there's only 3 chairs left, they have to sit in whichever one. My guess is going to be that they're walking in late or right before class starts. Everybody's here. They walk in the door. Everybody turns and looks at them. That's uncomfortable. They're going to sit in the chair that's closest to the door because they just want to sit down. Again, you've probably been there before. You came in someplace late, you open the door, everybody looks at you, and you're like, oh, man, I gotta find a seat. Right? So you run and get a seat real quick because you want everybody to stop looking at you, right? Because it makes you self-conscious, right? And this is the essence of what we're talking about with sociology, because I can construct a theory, a model of human behavior based on this, based on experience, based on what everything I've seen in my life that tells me that this is what happens every time you have the first day of class. But in addition to that, I can say, well, if this happens in every classroom I've ever taught in, I'm going to bet that any classroom that's similar, right, has the same it's a seating arrangement that's unassigned, there's individual chairs to sit in, and the people don't know each other, and they're allowed to sit anywhere, that the same sort of pattern is going to unfold. That's my guess. And I'm probably true, and I'm probably right about that. It's probably true in just about every circumstance. In fact, I would bet that on every college campus in the Arizona, for sure, that this happens in similar way every first day of class. And I can also guess that it doesn't matter if across the United States, right? Every college, every state, probably something similar happens, assuming there's similar dynamics, similar setup, right? Where it's again unassigned seats, they don't know each other, they come in one at a time or something to that effect, right? I can probably guess that a pretty good guess that this happens just about everywhere in a very similar way, right? And that's the key. This is what sociologists do. And that is a model, right? It's a model of human behavior. We can say that, show that to other people. We can write this down and predict behavior. And when you have a theory, right, which explains it, people choose their seats a certain way. They do it in this way. And then we model it, right? And say, this is how this typically unfolds. And then we can predict it, right? Which is a smaller part of that. Like, we can say that this is probably happening every classroom across the United States every time. That's the key. That's the thing. That's what sociologists do. Now, again, you probably never thought about this before because, why would you? Well, that's kind of the essence of this. That's what sociologists do. We point this stuff out. And it may seem sort of a who cares sort of thing on the surface, but have you ever thought about why you do what you do? Have you ever considered why it is that you sit where you sit? It's not always up to you, and it's not always something that you're thinking about. Instead, lots of times we do things without realizing that the reason we're doing it is because of what everybody else around us has already done. So it's not necessarily even a decision we're making. Instead, it's a decision that's limited in its options, and it's based off of what everybody else has already decided. And sometimes that can be unnerving to us, or even upsetting to us to realize that we don't have as much control in our society as we like to think. Again, think back to the other example I gave about moving from work to home, right? Your mom controls to some degree your behavior, your boss controls to some degree your behavior, and so do your friends, right? Because sometimes when you're with your friends, you may want to talk about something, but they think it's stupid, so you don't, right? So again, there's some notion of control there as well. You modify your behavior. So I hope this gives you a good understanding of what it is we're talking about here. And what's key about this too is that same sort of model, that same sort of theory that we just talked about with the seating arrangement is true in other places. Like I said, in the movie theater, go to a movie theater and you're going to see that everybody tries to leave at least a seat in between them. without fail, right? If you sit next to somebody, that person might get up and leave, like I did when I went to the movies. Boy, did that irritate me. Man, did that irritate me. I'll never forget that, because all I thought about was, she should know better, right? Because you should know better and I should know better, that's just not what we do. But in addition to that, so movie theaters, if you go to the library on campus, you'll see there's 8 tables in the general library area. People tend not to sit one next to one another. Instead, they sit here. The table's this way, right? They sit here and they sit here. And then only after the seats are taken do they fill in the rest and sit next to somebody. They always try to leave a seat behind, separate from one another. Go to the food court at the mall. And when you look at the food court at the mall, you will see that people try to maintain separation between themselves and other people. Again, strangers, right? People they don't know. They'll try to maintain separation to keep a table between themselves. That may not always work because it might be too busy. So again, they're going to look for the most accessible, the easiest place to get to, the closest to whatever restaurant they're sitting in. But these are the kinds of things we can see everywhere, which means that this theory, this model we have about how people choose their seats in a public place is a pretty good theory, right? It's a pretty good theory, and it makes sense just about every case. We can think of some very rare exceptions perhaps, but for the most part, you're gonna see this everywhere you go. And that is what makes sociology cool. Because like I said, you can walk out the door, and if you don't believe me, just look around and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And you'll understand, you'll recognize, you go, holy crap, this guy, not only did he say this, but I can see that what he's saying is absolutely true. I don't know that you're gonna get that in psychology, and I don't know that you're gonna get that in philosophy. Sociology is one of the few places where we can actually go out and actually see what's happening. And you know I'm not full of it, right? And that's kind of cool. So that's where I'm gonna wrap up today. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. I think it was kind of interesting. I'm sure right now you're thinking to yourself like, oh my God, how do I pick my seat on the first day of class? Do I look like a moron or not, right? That's okay, because everybody else does it too. But I hope that you enjoy this. There's gonna be another lecture here coming up real soon, so I hope so please watch that one as well. But anyway, I will talk to you soon.